We'll start. Oh, yeah, so yeah, thank you, Josh, for the introduction. Let's start into that. Well, not so surprisingly interesting field on the ISO standards, especially how they relate to human-centered design, because many people know that there are standards, but not how they really relate to our work is sometimes not really known because you have to have an access to that kind of information and also how this make work and it can help us. So let's start and dive right into the overview of the ISO standards. So that's me and actually we had already. So let's talk about why they are standards. And that's because we have a background, the history of human-centered design, usability, all relates to the human factors in the ecosystem. And that's pretty much based on work and organizational context. And there are some regulations in place, regardless of the country you live in, because there are international standards on work and on work performance and how you design work, how you structure work, because we are not talking always about, well, for the consumer, but also for people who work with the products we design or we create for, we develop or even plan or do architecture. So regardless of if we're talking about specific products, it's always about how people achieve their goal using interactive systems, technologies, or hardware products or software. And therefore, so there are some frameworks in place, tasks and physical environments and wider physical work environments. And all this is based on human factors, ergonomics, industrial anthropology stuff, where really people work, how to create work environments that are safe and well-being, utilize the human being in the best way, how teams should work, how organization work, how decision making is done. So all this is a long history, more than 150 years of practices that have been evolved after industrialization took place in the 19th century. So all this led to the idea that we need some standards, and that's what we call principles on standards. It's pretty much that is done it's done voluntarily. So there is no imposing structure that requires people to work on standards. It's done out of a voluntary basis. It's a public process. People can see what stages a standard is in. They can ask to participate. And that's also where broad participation is essential, that people in different countries agree to work on standards and to vote on standards. So they sign and set up the standardization bodies like ISO is a standardization body which is a kind of agreement and contracted by many countries. And the standard is intended to be as a formulation of consensus. So the standard is always a consensus and not always the opinion of the highest bidder kind of thing. We want to have a consensus, which is sometimes hard to achieve, sometimes not always the best, but that's sometimes you have to compromise, and something that is acceptable for different experts in different areas, especially in the field of human-centered design. We have so many different disciplines working together: engineers, psychologists, cultural science, designers, marketing people, very different qualification and backgrounds. They have to reach a consensus on some stuff that has to be standardized. The idea of uniformity is that we have one core text that we can really rely on and translate into different languages, but that's pretty much the baseline. We have all the same baseline, which ensures consistency on definitions and concepts and understandings. And therefore enhance the relevance of the words we use, of the stuff we teach, the stuff we produce and do in our work, artifacts, work, our methods, and even tools. Standard is intended to be and also seen legally as the state of science and state of art, so the state of practice, which can be standardized, and therefore it should help the efficiency in the economy, efficiency of things that people don't have to reinvent the wheel again and again because some things have been standardized. And also the idea is to have a reliable basis as benefit the professionalism, also education and also industrial practice. And of course, it's an international aspiration that these standards are intended to be used internationally, not only national. So we had some time in the 80s and 70s when we had, in the context of ergonomics and usability, at that time was totally different, or was even named different. Every country had its own standard. But when we talk about software and hardware design and designing processes and services, we tended to kind of understand each other better when we decided, okay, what you're talking about when you use that term. And then we started to work on internationalization of standards and let go of our local standards, like, for example, the ANSI standards in US, or BSI standards in UK, or DIN standards in Germany. So we created a new set of standards in the 80s and 90s, which are international standards. So the qualities of standards, or the benefits pretty much, is that they can be used for antitrust, for the consumer acceptance, because we can use a standard approach and also label standards, certifications based on standards. This gives a kind of legitimacy that other people understand what kind of reference you use. When you talk about this is standard I'm using, people can look at the standard app and see, okay, he's working, or this person is working after the standards and uses standards as this term. So it's a good pointing reference. It's also very important for small and medium enterprises that they can also use the standards. So standards aren't only used for big companies. Every company, even every person, can use standards. And also, it's very important for global acceptance. And of course, last but not least, it's a legal basis. So if we have a problem and we fight over specific qualities, you can always use a standard as a reference. And sometimes, in cases in legal disputes, people look at the standard and look up the quality which is outlined in the standard. That's a reference you can use as an arguing point. And sometimes, especially in technical standards, you have very specifics. You are very specific and write down, okay, you have to do it like this size and this weight and this dimensions. In ISO, especially on human-centered design, we don't have that kind of standard. It's a quality standard. And so it's very important to understand that these standards we use are used as setting up qualities for human-centered design activities and human-centered design. Unfortunately, they are not like books. So you can't sit there and you see at night, oh, I'm going to sleep, and let's read 2 or 4 chapters on the standard. They're very cumbersome. We try to change that. It's a long battle because ISO has regulations and more guidance and more helpful than they used to be. But they're always intended and aimed at specific target audiences. In the standard, we are also like, okay, people who are doing this should read the standard, and people who are doing this should read the standard. But nevertheless, they have to be written in a way that everybody can read and apply them. Of course, that's a very, let's say, good aspiration, but we have to really understand and really acknowledge that most likely people from the domain will read the standard, and not a person who has no idea whatsoever about human-centered design will understand everything which in the standard. But pretty much the idea is that a person who is interested in the subject matter can look at the standard and understand. It has always a specific scope. So whatever standards we have in human-centered design has specific scope, and we will see some of them. And they should not contradict themselves or others. So a standard should not say A and B at the same time. It's always very specific and should not contradict this standard or another standard in the series. And that's also a challenge because they are being evolved throughout several years, and things change. Sometimes they get more specific, or sometimes they change things, but it's a living thing, and the standards are always revised every 5 years. And of course, they're used to be intended as they should be intended as reference and sources. And a standard has always informal and normative. Normative is really giving guidance and recommendations and requirements. So let's have a look at the most important series, which is the 9241 series. And the 9241 series has a nice title, which is Ergonomics of Human System Interaction. And there's a series, as I said, has requirements. Requirements is pretty much, there is a shall in the sentence, which is you have to do it. And if you don't want to do it, it's your problem, but this is something you have to do in order to be compliant, which is pretty much a strong statement on quality and human-centered or human system interaction stuff. Recommendations is a should, or you can, which is, think about it. You should do it, but maybe there are some circumstances which prevent you to do it. Or maybe you're in a situation in your project where you can't do it yet. But this is something, it's a strong recommendation. Then there are some principles. Principles are specific explanations of core concepts which explain how we understand things, what's important to us. And general guidance is giving information about how to do it, what to look for, and how to adopt specific things. And really helping people to do their job, helping things to convey concepts. And the focus is always between the human being and the interactive system, and what that is also very important. We look at this soon, and also some core understandings, but we are not addressing specific methods or tools in standards. So there was a project on standards about methods for human-centered design. But at the time, I was also in German UPA, but we didn't feel well as professionals that the standards should prescribe specific methods. We don't even have an understanding what that method is, or what exactly how we would define that method. And the standard is not a place to define methods. It's pretty much the quality you want to define and what you standardize and understanding on stuff, but not prescribe specific methods. And that's very important to understand. The standard is not limiting, merely helping. So as a quality, and then we have to understand what is the story behind that concept of the human system interaction and the ergonomics of it. So that's why we have the part 11, which is pretty much the core definitions and concepts of usability, which is one of the oldest and most important concepts we have in human-centered design. And that's intended to establish the common ground, which is pretty much the definition of usability. And the concept and explaining what is efficiency, effectiveness, and satisfaction. The definition is over there. It's the definition we have in the standard of usability, which is the extent to which a system, product, or service can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a specified context of use. In order to understand this, what efficiency, effectiveness, and satisfaction means, we have the definitions of all the different stuff. But we also have many other definitions of user experience out. So I have pulled some different definitions from different people, from the Cambridge Dictionary, from the Nielsen Norman Group, from the product plan, from a blog post, or from Scaled Agile, where this is a document about Lean UX. And you see 5 different definitions of user experience. And of course, everyone can make their own definition, but the thing is, when we really want to use user experience and do research and do education and want to establish in an organization and understanding what is, so we can either choose one of those, or we can sit together and try to come up with an international consensus, which is the standardized definition. Especially, even if you look at those, they are not the same. And they also, some of them even define the term with the term itself, kind of. User experience refers to the feeling users experience. Well, that's what I want to define. So that's a poor approach to define things using the same terms that I want to define. So some of them are nice, but some of them are misleading and very unspecific. And so we have the definition of user experience from the ISO in 210. That was the first definition of user experience from ISO was done in 2010. The first edition of the 210 part. And the definition is users' perceptions and responses that result from use and/or anticipated use of a system, product, or service. So it's pretty much, those are the 2 things, usability and user experience, both very important. One is as a measurable quality, which is usability and the extent of something. And user experience pretty much neither good or bad, because it's a personal perception. It's something the user perceives. And what is good for me is maybe very bad for him or for her, because it's always what the user's perception. And of course, I can try to measure it. Therefore, I would go into some other measures of user experience and look for a specific context. And therefore, I'm close to the usability to do something that is really objective measurement of user experience. When we look at the usability terms, we have also definitions for effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. And also this has changed in the last few years. For example, satisfaction was defined 10 years ago or so as absence of discomfort, because people who wrote these standards couldn't have a consensus that is more helpful, that was more helpful at the time, as the absence of discomfort, which is not satisfaction. Now we have something that is far more hitting the point, or more closer to the mark, which is the extent to which the user's physical, cognitive, and emotional responses that result in the use of a system, product, or service meet the user's needs and expectations, or even exceeds them. So it's really, I'm surprised it's helping satisfaction. It's more the needs and expectations that are met, and also all the emotional responses as we have here. So being lucky, being happy, all this is part of satisfaction. And also effectiveness is, can I achieve, and how completely can I achieve my goal? Efficiency is resources spent, and satisfaction, as we talked about. And these are our core qualities in usability. And this is something we can measure. Please note that we also use all the time system, product, or service. We don't distinguish between product, system, or service in human-centered design. That's very important, because there is no human-centered design for a product and other human-centered design for a service, or a completely other thing for a system, because it's the same approach, the same principles apply, the same definitions apply, regardless if it's a big system or just a small product or a service I'm designing. So we don't care about that separation. When we look at the story behind is the 6384, which is standard on ergonomics. And that's the definition of the quality why we need usability, why usability and human-centered design, user experience, is very important. It's not just setting things. It's an obligation, as I said before, because things affect people when they're using the systems and services and products we design. And that's why we have ergonomics or human factors. So there's a similarity in the terms. You can argue with that, but that's how the standard is written. And that's the discipline, the scientific, the science behind all this, with understanding of interactions among human and other elements of a system, and the profession that applies theory, principles, data, and methods to design in order to optimize human well-being and overall system performance. So we have to get together the human well-being of the human being and the system performance. That's ergonomics. Meaning, if we in human-centered design don't know what we're doing, we can harm people. And harming does not mean breaking bones. Harming can also mean increasing mental load, make stress people. And stressing, and if you put too much stress and load towards people, and they don't even understand, don't even get it, and don't even know it, they get sick. They got too much pressure. They do things they don't want to do. Deceptive patterns, the same thing, nudging in the wrong way. All this is not ergonomic stuff, and this is also what we have to understand. Human-centered design is not making things nice and pretty. It's doing things in a way that they increase and safeguard well-being and performance of the system. The human-centered approach is defined also in 210. That's the title of the part, is a human-centered design. The approach to systems design and development that aims to make interactive systems more usable by focusing on the use of the system and applying human factors, ergonomics, and usability knowledge and techniques. So putting not the function first, not putting the business first, but putting the human being first, that the human can achieve the goals and tasks and all the well-being using usability knowledge and ergonomics. It's pretty much a focus away, or the additional focus that is employed in addition to other processes. And that's very important, that human-centered design is an approach to the design system or business system or whatever that's added value to that, not replacing. So there's a business model, there's a system architecture. We add the human-centered perspective to that, and we don't say, okay, there's no such thing as systems architecture or business modeling, not replacing those, it's adding value to existing models. So that's the human-centered approach. And we find that not only in software development, it's very important. Regardless of what we develop, we even in organization development, we refer to the human-centered design approach. So let's look at some definitions in this part 210. So accessibility, for example, it's very important. The European Accessibility Act is coming up, which requires accessible solutions, regardless if they're public space or not. So this is the definition of accessibility. Also, this has changed in the last few years. And as I said, definitions evolve and change because technology and understanding changes. So it's not written in stone. Standards are living things. And this is a definition of accessibility. And of course, it's always about the context of use. So we answer all the time, which is not an answer anyway. So it depends. It's just an introduction to an answer. And the context pretty much is very important to our work. So we always have to understand what is the context of use of the system, product, service we develop. So the context is defined as a combination of users, goals, tasks, resources, and environment. Physical environment, social environment, cultural environment, huge differences. And it's very important to understand this, and this gives us the scope for the project to understand what kind of research I have to do, and what kind of tools, technology, what kind of people I have to talk to, what kind of customers do I have, and all this stuff. And by the way, yes, customers are always users, but not always users are customers. Goal, the intended outcome. It's very important. This is a small, tiny definition, but very important one, because you can argue 2, 3, 4 days, months, weeks about goals, but not defining what the goal really is. The goal is not doing something. It has been done. I don't want to search for a nice little apartment. I want to have found one. So not the way is the goal, which is pretty much a task I have to do to achieve the goal, but the goal is the outcome. It's very important to have that set up, especially when you do negotiations. What is an interactive system? Interesting. We are talking about when we talk interactive systems all the time. It's not software. It's not also hardware. It is a combination of hardware and or software and or services and or people that users interact with in order to achieve specific goals. Me opening a door, this is an interactive system. Me talking to a person, interactive system. Me using hardware in a software, interactive system. Me at a point of sales in a store, interactive system. Understand we are talking about holistic approach in system design. It's not only the software or only hardware, it's combinations, can either be that and that and that, and understand that we have to have this broad view. It's not about software only. It's very important. Prototype, and especially for interactive systems, because sometimes you have brackets and definitions, because prototype is a term also used in completely different contexts, in other standards. In our context for interactive systems, the representation of all or part of an interactive system that can be used for analysis and design innovation. Stakeholder, very important, because we have to take stakeholders into account in our stuff. Also look at the stakeholder needs and expectations, task, activities required to achieve a goal. Then we have the user, which is always a person, not a technical user. In terms of a printer is also a user in UML, whatever. In human-centered design, it's always a person who interacts with the system, product, service. User interface are the components which are presented by the interactive system to help the user do his or her tasks. And then validation and verification is interesting because this is a very old terms. They're based in ISO 9000, which is the quality standard definition. It's pretty much about that we have verification first, which is confirmation through the provision of objective evidence that we have specified requirements fulfilled, or that a statement is true, so we can verify, okay, this has been done, technically done, is there, it's true. And the validation is that we have the same aspiration to have objective evidence that this requirement has been fulfilled for specific use. Meaning, for example, technically can prove this feature is implemented. But when the user interface is so realized that the user cannot use that function because it doesn't see the button or whatever, he doesn't understand what's written there, and is not able to use that, it's not validated because the user cannot use that in the intended use. So therefore, validation fails. And these core concepts are very important because actually these are core concepts in human system engineering, also human-centered design, how we meet requirements we identified out of user research. Verify has been done, validated, it can be used by the target population. So these are just a few examples which are very essential in our daily work. When we know this and we can use that definitions in our work, we talk to each other within the professionals, also within an ecosystem in a company, understand what we're talking about. And when we talk about validation and talk about user, when we talk interactive system, what we really mean. And it also helps us navigate that we not only belong within the software team, because we do different things as well. Parts of us is all software development, parts are not related. And so to see the concept, how the whole structure is, and that's the part of 100, is pretty much the overview of the software ergonomic standards. Software is the old, but still in use, not only related to software, but also systems, system ergonomic standards. It gives an overview of the different parts of part 9241. This is a small picture I made that you see how these big series on human-centered design standards, how they relate to each other. We have the 6385 ergonomics principles in design of work systems as a foundation standard. The quote I give you, the definition of ergonomics and human factors, is out of that standard. And then we have the fundamentals on the concepts of human system ergonomics. Part 11, I showed you the usability definitions and concepts. Some of them I just showed you briefly, the definition of usability. And then you have the part 210 and 220, which is what processes and activities. That's just now recently come up in 221, which is an assessment standard on how to assess human-centered design activities. And then we have part 110, which interaction principles, and part 112, principles for the presentation of information. And then we have the series between 120 whatever and part 900, which are hardware, software specific, workplace and environment, specific applications, tactile haptic systems, accessibility stuff like keyboards or displays. So these are really more like qualities for specific application. And then we have another nice series, and you see the dash in between, ISO IEC. IEC is another standardization body, engineering community, which is a kind of technical standards. And they have a joint working group where the quality ISO standard people and the technical software engineering people sit together and make joint statements on information items and documentation, what you produce when you do human-centered design activity. And these are information items, and they are to describe what you have to document when you do the context of use description, or what a user requirement is, and what is a user needs report. And this all applies, as I said, ISO IEC to all different information items, except the user requirements, because they are different. There's all the story behind this. There would be a whole series of webinars about that. But that's only in ISO, not ISO IEC, because there's a history about that. So we have to look at these core principles and have with me the core principles of interactions. And that's part 9241.110. And if you look at these principles for human system interaction, which apply to human systems, whatever you do in system design or product design or service design, these are the core principles. First is suitability for the user's task. So pretty much you have to make sure that the user can perform the task at hand to achieve a goal, pretty much. Otherwise, this wouldn't be effective at all. Then the system should be self-descriptive. So self-descriptiveness, so the people using the system know where they are, know what they can do next, so they're not surprised by interactions, that you have patterns in place that people can rely on. And therefore, we are close to the conformity with user expectations. And that's a good example. A negative example is when we have deceptive patterns and you have the close button you experience in your Windows environment always on the upper right corner. And then within the pop-up, you do exactly the subscribe button on the same place where you would expect close button, so you kind of trick people in the wrong interactions. That's playing with this user expectation in the wrong way, because a very strong principle that you have to understand what people would likely expect, and therefore you have to understand what kind of audience you're talking to. Learnability, so the system supports learnability because it's transparent how you interact with the system. You can text labels are there that helping you understand and learn the system. Controllability is that you can control how you interact with the system. You can maybe interrupt the system or go back, or you can pick things up later on. Use error robustness, that was also renamed recently. It was used to be called error tolerance. Now we have another concept. Use error robustness is different strategies to help people avoid errors or to repair errors, like an undo version, for example, or if you have the system can help you that avoiding to enter data that's already there, so you don't have to enter the data again. And last but not least, and it's a very interesting one, you can also argue about that a long time, is user engagement. Before the latest edition of this part, we had another, not this principle, another principle that was individualization. That is now part of controllability, that the user can control how the system should be adopted for his or her personal needs. And now we have user engagement. It's pretty much the system should invite the use of using the system, and should be engaging and helpful and assistive, and people like to use it. And so it pretty much should be awful to use, and people really would like it. So that's the thing, is addressing the needs and also the expectations, and also the user experience part, which is also addressing the emotional part, that engaging is really, I'm kind of feel invited by the system in terms of I'm not pushed back. So that's the idea. Understand that principles always apply. You cannot choose I do this but not this, because they're always there. It's kind of was done in research years ago, and it's very well funded in the UX psychology stuff, that really these are principles you can really trace quality to. So now there are no exceptions. It's always not an if, but how to do it. It's pretty much you cannot choose not to do UX, because whatever you do, whenever you release a system, there will be a user experience. So the decision of the company is doing is not to invest or not invest. They invest already. So they should do it planfully and with strategic aspect, not just by accident. That's pretty much what the principle is also pointing out. You have to look into it because you're doing anyway. So there's always a quality of principle system. The other big part is the principles for the presentation for information. And that's part 112. And there are the core principles for the presentation information. Detectability. So the present information must be in a way presented that it can be detected as being there, visual or also auditive. If you have a sound, there must be a way that people can perceive it and detect it. Interpretability. So it should be presented, information should be presented in a way that it's comprehended by the target people, by the users, in a way that I want them to interpret it as in a way I intended to be interpreted. So a warning should be interpreted as a warning, not as a nice, I don't know, ringtone. So discriminability, sorry, is that it can be understood as discrete from other information. So if I have two paragraphs, they should be presented also as two paragraphs. If there are two different groups of information, they should be perceived as different groups, not as a group which just can't be with this layout. So, conciseness, very important. Only the necessary information is presented, which is important for the task or for the context. Everything else, write out. That's important because we don't want to have too much visual or auditive noise in the user interface. The interface should be concise, to the point, helping people. It's very important in critical situations. Again, freedom from distraction, stressing that point again. If you have information that is concise, but could be presented in a way that is distracting. For example, you have moving parts in it, or you have an ongoing reel or moving pictures, which is nice, maybe, but not always all the time. It would be distraction. Distraction increases mental load. People maybe think it's nice, but it's not. And last one is consistency. Internal, external consistency is if you do have a pattern of interactions in your system, stick to it. Don't change that pattern. If you have a safe routine, stick to the routine throughout the system. If you have a routine for entering data in a specific way, keep that way, keep it consistent. Do not change things, do it like this time, this the other time. Make it understand that it's consistent internally, and even if you have another system, for example, you have a specific behavior, which is also closely related to the platform you're using. It's Microsoft or Apple or another mobile platform maybe. Look what people are most likely expecting to maintain also external consistency. Don't use creepy words for stuff that is commonly used. For example, people will understand what clear means or cancel means. Don't come up with different things. Stick to what cancel means. Then we have some guidance on visual presentation information. Now visual now is interesting because now we are entering the tricky things. Not really, but people always argue with me about that. 122 is and how much a standard is interfering with my creative freedom. It is not. So these are some of the core guidances, like legibility of information, visual structuring of information, using interface elements to organize information, talking about graphical objects, how to use them, what you have to, not how to use them, but maybe what to be aware of when you're using it. Also coding techniques on use of color. An example just for the letter two is coding techniques is, for example, country codes. You can use a +49, the German country code, versus 004. Because this +49 makes clear that it's a country code for telephone, and 049 is more like a number. Phone numbers, you can group them in three or twos to make it to increase the legibility of the longer numbers. If you have one long number, it's very hard to distinguish different numbers. Date formats, you have different culture with different date formats, month, day, year, or day, year, month, or whatever. The last one is the international ISO standard one, which is a year, month, and date, because of ordering structure. The IBAN is then the banking number. There's a specific format for this. And then also how you align numbers in their formatting. We have now this point to indicate the thousands versus if you don't have it, and helping, for example, on the right-hand side, you have then this decimal comma point where you can really see is behind or before that if you have, for example, an amount in a currency. So this all gives some guidance helping to structure information. Another thing, it would be use of color. You should not, and you shall not, and by the way, you shall not only rely on color to coding. For example, if you change green to red, indicating now it's locked, not enough, it's wrong. You have to have additional information, not only the color change, to see, for example, there's an X on the red, or you have to write off to it to make it clear that's not only the color change, color blindness, for example. It's not only the color that changes. So this kind of guide is this kind of system. Another thing is also become interesting about brilliance and brightness, and of course dark mode is a thing adding to that kind of information. We all know about discussion. Do you like dark mode? Not like, it's not about liking. It's an economic fact that it is harmful to people. Maybe you like it, maybe she likes it, but it's not about liking. We should always be aware that dark mode is harming. Aside from rare situations where we maybe not, but most of the time it's really harming because too much light comes into the pupil. and therefore people get too much strain on their eyes, leading to some effects, but later on, even people are not really able to see things sharp enough. But this is an emotional debate. We understand that, but physiologically, it's an easy answer. It's not a good thing. Again, just an example about contrasts and color use, and there's some other guidance about in what kind of color combinations. But this is just guidance, make people aware that there are some things that you should look into. And of course, then this helps to part 61, which is about user interface elements. So not auditory, not tactile, only the visual user interface elements. And this scope is pretty much, it's about consistent behavior, not how it should look like, not how you implement it, not what kind of colors, what kind of the stage should look like, but really pretty much about the idea: what is this element? How you should use it, and when you use it, on what you should be aware of, what kind of guidance you need to implement. And this is just a list of the elements in this standard, and there will be more because it's just now in review. Just got the mail this morning that this next stage is coming in for this standard, part of the editors of the standard. And these are the elements in the standard. There will be again some more upcoming. Also, we will look into other new elements like avatars or badges or disclaimers and so stuff. So, and this gives you information about what is it, when to use it, and when to use it, how to use it, to make sure that the most important guidance is, for example, you don't use an option group check marks. If there's more than 10 check boxes, you should think of another interface element if you have a selection of many options. And this gives some guidance. The thing is that we have, again, we don't talk about specific implementation strategies or design or even the use of color or type or fonts. It's about the quality of the concept we're talking. The standard we talked about before is 9241 210, which is the human-centered design. It's pretty much the human-centered design activities. You have to plan the human-centered design process in your organization, and you have the project, which is addressing and understanding the specified context of use, and the specifying user requirements, producing design solutions, evaluating design. And these 4 core activities, you iterate whenever you need, and these 4 core activities are central to human-centered design. And there's some principles. Again, principles, remember, they always apply. If you don't have to choose. You cannot choose. They always apply. These are the core principles of human-centered design, which helps us identifying the maturity of a product team, of an organization, but also of a process, a life cycle process. We look at how they follow these kind of recommendations and requirements. The solution is always based on a comprehensive understanding of users, tasks, and environments. Again, the context involved during the user is involved during conception, design, development. Not meaning they're sitting on my lab telling me what to do, but information from users is very important. Refinement adoption of solutions is continuously driven on the basis of evaluation by users. I need to have feedback to iterate. Iteration is essential. That's the same with agile approaches. Design takes entire user experience into account, again, holistically speaking, not only the software, but also the hardware and all the stuff, where it's running in the point of sales, whatever I need to make this experience count. And of course, the design team, development team, product team, whatever you name it, is an interdisciplinary aspect. So I have to have people from different disciplines come together and share the point of view and work on this. So it's not a unicorn thing. There are no unicorns. You have to have different aspects. For example, it's not a standard, just to understand what is the backstory behind it. If you do the conceptual design, interface design of a system, you should not be the person who's testing, because you're always biased. That's a no-go. But you have to have different perspective. Researchers, testers who do the test, because that's their focus. Your focus is designing the stuff, testing. And again, this helps us getting together different perspectives together, and that's very essential. Business people talking to the UX people, talking to developers, but not replacing each other, helping each other. It's very essential. And the activities context of use is the first activity, which is, these are all the aspects of the context of use, what we're talking about, the user population, the goals of the users, and the goals of the organization is also very important. We have to understand the business story behind that. Tasks of the users, the environments of the users and their resources, problems, and maybe improvements we have. All this is part of a living documentation. It's growing over time. Early on, it's very initial. We have maybe a one sentence we start with, and then we get more and more information, and it's a living document. The more we know, the more we can add to that, adding personas and adding more data. Then we have user requirements. They are based on user research and user needs. Important. They are based on user research. So a sales guy cannot write user requirements because the sales guy has only his only opinion, or a lady from marketing has their opinion on marketing. But these user requirements are based on user needs, user research. It's very important. And what is user need? That's over there. There are also definitions, very important that we have definitions of what is a user need, not user wish or user demand. It's not about what the user wants or tells me, it's the need behind that. And the prerequisite, what is really needed in terms of what can I derive from user research within a specific context. And the user requirement is a set of requirements for use that provide the basis for design evaluation to meet identified user needs. Important. Meet identified user needs, not stakeholder needs, user needs. So that's very important that we have user requirement as an addition to other requirements. Within the requirement set, the requirements should not contradict each other. That's bad cultural taste. But that's not true for user requirements. They can contradict other requirements. We have business requirements, and there are maybe user requirements contradict business requirements. That's why we have to treat them differently. Of course, the challenge is we look at requirements, and as a part of human-centered design is the ambition, the task is obliged to the user experience people to have a consensus to iron out all the differences between requirements, that we have a consensus what to build. But what happens, we have a wish, we have a demand, we have a need, we have requirement, specification, solution, and we have visual phases in different in requirements management. Unfortunately, what happens, we have a feature wish, a feature idea, a user story coming up from, I don't know what's happened, and we start developing. So we don't do these next steps and look into what we need to do and prioritize all this stuff. And finally, we do then the testing, which is either based on users or experts to come up with the analysis of the stuff if we met the requirements. So that's a brief overview, and I'll skip the deliverables on design, because actually you know what to do with prototyping and wireframes, all the stuff. But this is just a brief glimpse on the standards. Feel free to ask a question. Thank you for your time. And this is only a small, slight insight.
Well, thank you, Clemens. I feel like we should sign up for the classes you are teaching at university and learn a lot more about this. I know a question that always comes up when we talk about ISO standards, or really any standards, as people probably go out and Google them, and then they are shocked to find how expensive they are. So what is your advice for someone who's interested in, reading more about the standards, but not necessarily dropping over $1,000 for the complete package?
Well, the complete package is depending what the complete package is, but they are depending what kind of standard, depending where you buy it, it's around $100 or $120 a standard. It's pretty much like a book, like a big literature book, and it's the same, treated the same. I would suggest that that you invest some money in the most important one, which is the part 210, human-centered design, and you give an understanding of the whole picture, which is a pretty much important one. And then you could also go to the ISO website, and the ISO there's a website, iso.org, and there's also a subsite where you can look up terms and definitions. So the definitions are not normative. You can look it up, and they're free. You can just type in the term you're interested in, and it pops up with some definitions in ISO, and you can look up the definitions. And therefore, you can learn about those core concepts pretty much for free. And then you can decide what is very important for you. For example, especially the stuff on deliverables, if you work on the more on the strategy part, on the context of use, definition of products and projects, maybe by that part. And sometimes also literature about this using the standards, and sometimes you can work with companies that have access already, because industry works with standards all the time. Most of the people in UX don't do, because either they don't know and I think they're not applied to them. But your clients most likely work with standards all the time, so maybe they have access.
Thank you. So speaking of the feeling that maybe the standards don't apply to us as a UX professional, why do you think that is, that there's sort of a low awareness of standards that honestly date back for decades?
Well, it's maybe three reasons. Just kidding. Three it is, I guess. So one is, of course, in education programs, they are very low represented, because it's either very psychological education, or even in working medicine sometimes, or in human factors. They tend to quote some standards, but in psychology or even communication science, they don't use standards, so they're not taught. They're not even part of the educational curriculum. And in design, also, because not based, they're not aimed at design. So people in design courses don't learn about them either, because it's not part of the curriculum. In human factors, in work industry, and also in ergonomics and anthropology, it's part of curriculums, but most of the people are not from this region or from this area. And as I said, if you are in industrial design or even in manufacturing, people are used to get exposed to standards early on, so they know. So your clients know. So that's why they don't talk about, because they don't know how to adopt it, and don't even know about them in the first place. The second part, big problem, is that when people hear about this, and people maybe even read a small part in a literature and some books, even quote some standards, they think, oh, they want to determine my creativity. They want to limit my creativity.
Mm.
I want to use that tool in the way I want to use it. I don't want a standard to tell me what I do and what I can't do, which is not the case in the first place. But people don't know how the standard works. They don't know what the standard is about, and what the concept. It doesn't tell me use this color, don't this color, make it like round edges, or no, it's not about that. But people are afraid of. And this is quite often said, no, I don't want the standard to prescribe or to predefine my creativity or my output. The last one is that people really don't feel comfortable with it, because they feel they're not well educated or well prepared, not educated, sorry for that, equipped to use them wisely. Because sometimes they say, no, we have this obligation in standards, so the client's telling me do this like this and this, and they're
Mhm.
just happy to kind of oblige them in a way, but they don't feel equipped to use it properly. And for example, and I was in a situation as well when I was in South, the client wanted me to do something which is completely unethical. Really doing a task, producing a task in a way that is really not helping the people, really optimizing only the business case, but really putting lots of loads on the user. And I said, no, we have data that shows the other version is better, achieving the same goal. And the client still insisted, no, I know best. So okay, and I said, okay, you want me to violate that principle and that principle and that principle? Please, I've found it written that you're violating that standard. And then suddenly this guy, oh no, I wouldn't do that. So this is a weapon. We have an obligation, because when we fail our duty to the, sounds now very high nose, but that's what we do if we harm our audience, because that's what we do if we miss the ergonomic target. If we don't look for the well-being of people, we harm people. We harm long-term, people get sick. We know this for 20 years. There's European Union project about usability on work ergonomics, and also system ergonomics and software ergonomics. We know that bad software harms people. It increases sick days, it increases mental load, it increases stress, it increases this burnout syndrome. We know this for 20 years now. And still people want us to do things which are unethical and harmful for people. No, we don't have to, because we can. So okay, we can violate this stuff, but please tell me that you're doing so by written. Sign it. And they won't do it. So this is a weapon. It's intended to help us professionals act professional.
Well,
And that's the idea.
I'm always happy to be given a weapon. But let's say that you, like me, become interested in contributing to the standards or helping advance our profession. What can we do as UX professionals to take part in this process?
Well, again, this is a standardized. No, just kidding. No, the thing is how it works. You come become you use you go to your local standardization body, which is the ANSI in the US, the BSI in UK, and the AFNOR in France, and DIN in Germany, and well, the Austrian standards in Austria also. And then you say, I want to partake in standardization. And then you take part in a local committee who's working on standards on human-centered design, which is the series 241. And then if you say, now I want to take it out, do local reviews, you do vote upon the stuff, you give information, you do add some your thoughts within your country. But also you can say, I want really part of the committee who's writing the standards. And that's in this case is the ISO committee, which is the ergonomics technical committee on economics and work processes in WG6 in ISO. And then you get accredited from your local body as an expert to ISO. And then you join the ISO working group, and then you would be one of my colleagues working on this kind of standards. And then you're part of team who's discussing this, and so maybe in some time you become an editor who is then responsible for writing the standard according to the ISO guidelines. So it is pretty much a national, international thing to partake and then work with the stuff, and it's a interesting partner. You learn a lot from many interesting people, and it's a kind of discussion where you really have to be willing to compromise and really to learn from different people how different people do see it differently. And it's very interesting to see if you talk about a specific topic and you think it's everything is clear, and then suddenly people from the country, from Asia, from Korea, from Japan, have a completely different understanding of it, and it's interesting to see and how to if this is if there's a way to a consensus. But this is how you partake, and most countries are involved, but that's how you can do it. And of course, UXPA also has a liaison to the standardization, so you can also pass your point of view to the UXPA, and they convey it with a liaison person from Switzerland, I guess, to the ISO committee. So yeah, we even from UXPA we get feedback from standards.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for a very informative talk. And I have certainly been inspired to take this topic more seriously. I hope others have been as well. Thanks once again for staying up late your time. And thanks to all of our attendees.
Thank you,
All
and
right.
happy time. See you.
All right. Good night, everyone.